Do I think that Black people should be at the heart of Black stories?
I think it's really important that we tell our own stories. I think up to now our stories have been omitted or told for us.
It's very important who's telling our stories. And if you don't realise that, you need to realise it's very important that the stories that are being told are told without sensationalism, that they're told from an aspect of truth.
So it really starts with whose voices are being heard from when pen is first put to paper, when an idea is created in the first place. And if we're not seeing people that look like us at the very start of the project, at the birth of a project, then it filters down from there. It's essential, because then how is that story being told? Is it being told from a white person's perspective, or is it being told from a Black person's perspective? It can become quite confusing.
And so because it's not a sort of level playing field at the moment, I think we need to really address that, and we really need to ensure that we speak with our own voices and we tell our own stories from our own perspective. And I think particularly on theatre productions, I think this needs to be right across the board. So not just the actors, but I think it goes right through the creative team and right up to the producers as well. And, you know, everybody making the decisions around that work.
Being in a creative industry, it's very clear in the world of casting, in the world of directing, in the world of producing, that it is very much a white-led industry. And why I want to lead with that is because when it comes to telling certain stories, I think it's not that we're saying white people cannot understand what pain is. If the story has pain, they cannot understand what it's like to be left out. But there is an element of us as a community that they will never understand.
For me, it's important who is telling the stories, because so much of our Black people's history has been erased.
It is important for me who is telling stories of the African diaspora. I think there is, but that also requires a Black person who is consciously aware, that has a level of emotional sensitivity and development. I'm not just going to put a label on only Black people can make Black work because this so-called Black person is kind of, they haven't done the work on themselves. They are not doing the work on themselves in terms of understanding and decolonizing themselves. They're just replacing the white man.
It's important to me that people who have ordinarily not been able to tell their own stories get to tell their own stories. If we are living in a place of equity and equality, I'm like, if a white person wants to tell a story about a Black person, that's great. Because I never want to be pigeonholed that I can only tell stories about Blackness. Like, I would hate that to be. And in fact, I've had that. I've had people go, so what's your Black story? And I want to write a sci-fi. You know what I mean? So I would hate that to be the case. But when we're talking about marginalized people, we have to have a special dispensation that understands that historically their stories have been stolen from them and retold by the oppressor. So we have to allow for those marginalized groups. I'm not talking just across race now. I'm talking across like ability, like disability and gender and all kinds of things. We need to be able to go, we can take ownership of our stories so you can hear the truth of it. And then when we get to a place where it's like, there's equality, there's equity here, then I'm really open, because I think we live in a creative world. We live we're storytellers, we're artists, so we should be able to transcend just our own experience and just tell that and be in our little niche bubble. But until there is genuine equity, there is going to have to be an allowance for some people to kind of go, actually, these are the people best told to tell this story because they never get to do this.
In a way where the stories are told, I think they're being told from a sort of front-facing principle whereby the cast might be all of an African or Caribbean background, but actually the creative team or all of the bodies around that work and all of the decision making around that work may not be in the hands of people of African or Caribbean descent.
Still, for me, a huge issue is I will walk in a room as an actor and the whole panel will be white, the whole creative team will be white, the whole production team will be white, from the runner to the DOP. And until we start seeing ourselves in all aspects of the industry, we're not going to feel seen.
You've got a room full of black people doing all of the work, and you look at the front of the room, and everyone is white, nodding and collecting the money, asking us, "Oh, how would we do this in your culture? Tell me how you would do this in your culture." I don't know, are you the director?
What's tended to happen historically is when there's a high profile piece where it's a black story, where it's a black narrative, in the West End, at a regional theatre, a major regional theatre, in a major London theatre, it has often been that a white director has directed it. And then maybe when there's work that has been less high profile, then it's kind of been okay for a black director to direct a black story.
The issue is that we're in environments where black people are being asked to direct, musical direct, star in, create the show, and then the white creatives are winning the awards for it. And what do we get? We just get a little piece of change at the end.
Real bravery is saying, I want this story to be put on, and for this story to be put on, it shouldn't be me that drives the van to the destination. It should be somebody else, because there are nuances and cultural things that we as a black community experience and know, and that are givens that I don't think a white director will get that same nuance. And the nuances aren't just about telling stories, they're about the respect and comfort within rooms, and rehearsal rooms in particular are really important. And the problem is that the stories that are told, the black stories that are told, are just a lot of the time lacking in black joy.
But I think historically there has been, I don't know, when you look at stories about the Caribbean, or if you look at stories about Africa, generally speaking, they can be quite reductive. You know, where's the depth? Where's the nuance? Where's the complexity? And it's easy to look at stories. I mean, I can think of examples now on TV where they're set in the Caribbean, and it's almost like the island's a backdrop rather than being integral to the story. The black characters, while not quite stereotypes, they are add-ons, they are backups to the main white characters, and that's really sad. I think it's really, really sad that in this day and age, black people are still being used as the best friend, or the supportive colleague, rather than the main love interest.
I'd be wrong if I didn't say that there haven't been like iterations of like black life on screen, but I always feel like that there's always a sort of like, it gets sidelined, it gets put into its own box. And this is what I mean, like, you know, if you take something like Top Boy, it's in terms of its like social currency, it's always been sort of like moved to the side as like, oh yeah, it's great, but it's about that.
For me personally, it's about motivation. And if you're there to educate, and I'm not saying that non-black people can't tell, but I need to know the purpose and the point and why you're doing it. And if you haven't got something genuine, then you need to be taken off that project, and you need to put somebody behind it that can handle that responsibility, that can answer those hard-hitting questions here. Because these are important narratives, these are important stories, these are people's stories. And you should handle them with care.
You know, with white leadership telling black stories, I think that is, I don't think it's impossible, but I think there is a certain nuance, and I think because of where we are within history, until it is normal to just see a bunch of black directors telling black stories, then I feel like it will be cool. But I feel like because it's this need to take over, that I see that whiteness sits within this need to kind of be constantly telling people what to do, constantly being the heroes. You know, that's the story that they get to tell all the time. Yeah, we need to be telling our own stories for a while now, and I think that's okay, and we mustn't be apologetic about that.
If you're a powerful producer or director, or basically anyone who has influence at the top of an arts institution, you see things through your lens, which is fine, but we've seen it through that lens for too long, and the industry has been conditioned to sort of think that like that is the only thing that is relevant, or from an economical point of view sells. So we have to change it, like we have to address it, and we have to like redress the what is an imbalance of sort of like viewpoints and opinion and experience.
So for us to authentically and respectfully tell black narratives or Asian narratives or Arab narratives, we need to pass the mantle to those people to write those stories and tell those stories and commission those stories. Otherwise, it's constantly and consistently through a white lens. And until we have white collaborators or white creatives who are willing to hand over the space, we're always going to be kind of apologizing for being there.
It's about looking at each of these individual experiences and go and saying, who's the best person to take on this piece? And it's also for those people that might get those opportunities to ask themselves, am I really the best person to take this on? Am I moonlighting in this world? Or do I have a genuine knowledge and desire and passion to tell this story?
So the director who stepped aside for a black director because he felt like the black director was going to be able to tell that story, like, yeah, good, really good work. That's the kind of allyship I like to see. You've realised that you're in this position of power. You're about to tell a story about a very influential black man, and the person at the helm has no links to it. Like, what's that about? Now, I don't want it to go down the route of like only black people can talk about black people, or white people can talk about white people, or gay people can talk about gay people, or trans people can talk about trans people. But if there's no one in the room also helping you tell these stories, then there's an issue.
When you've got a space and there's somebody telling a black story and the director is black or the MD is black and the space is actually black, there's a magic that comes with that, and we're able to tell the story in all its truth. We don't have to have that battle with the creative team about, oh, but that wouldn't happen, or I wouldn't do that, because there's that unspoken truth that is already there because they understand us. So I do think it's very important that we have more people in the spaces when we are telling these stories, whether it be a director, an MD, if it's a musical, or an assistant director, that can help tell the story correctly.
It's giving black artists like the autonomy to tell their stories, but also, like I May Destroy You did, like it hit universally, and it proves this point that we're not bound by like this one single experience. Like, we can be like fully rounded, complicated human beings. Like, we're just human beings at the end of the day.
And I think that's what's exciting. I think people want to see that. We've seen so much examples of when that happens, how successful that work is, and how interested people are to watch it and understand things from that perspective. But I think we're only at the very beginning of that. I think when those incidents do happen, that it's a story written by people of an African or Caribbean descent, played by them, directed by them, the whole creative team is predominantly African and Caribbean. I think we are only just starting to see what that work is like and could be like, and how successful it is. But by no means have we really started that yet.
You know, the question I always ask is, are we coming from a hurt or a healed place? Are you coming from a healed place? Then you'll know the work that you need to do when you're telling a certain story.
Change is truly going to happen when there are black people creating the stories, there are black people coming up with the ideas, there are black people making the thing happen, funding the thing, you know. When that starts happening, I feel like that's the change I want to see.
It's not enough that our voices are just on stage. It's about ownership of those voices and our own narrative. Because if we don't have that, then we're just replicating plantation.
But ultimately, just open your doors. Open your doors and see the amazing talent that's out there beyond the status quo.